Hello, Brabs. We're back with Napoleon, Bisexual Emperor, Major General Frank Richardson, MD. We will conclude on chapter, what is this, 5? Is it 5? Chapter 3. That ain't the right one. I'm in the wrong section. That's the ghost stories. Jesus Christ. Chapter 5. When discussing the threatened divorce, she had told Fauch of her doubts of Napoleon's ability to father a child, even with the new wife, to which Fauch replied that someone would see to it that he did have children. This was, of course, the kind of situation to which the Dowager Empress had no intention of exposing her daughters. It may not have been only from Josephine on other members of the court circle that Dowager Empress's envoy had heard the spicy tales about the impotent emperor, for such talk was general currency in France. Anyhow, the reports from France convinced the Tsar that his mother had been right after all. And when Caulaincourt, the French ambassador, pointed out that Napoleon had a son by Marie Walewska, Alexander refused to accept this as evidence, saying that everyone knew about what young Polish women were like, and she had probably had other lovers. Napoleon himself, when telling his brother Lucien that Count Walewski, the husband of this favorite mistress, was impotent, added with a smile that this was a subject about which he knew something. Napoleon's impotence, then, was a topic which intrigued his family, his subjects, his enemies, and even his fellow sovereigns. It was a matter of concern to others when he was discussing the heir to his empire or planning a second marriage. Before his first marriage, it was a personal problem which troubled only himself. Many historians have described Napoleon's frantic search for a wife in 1795 and 1796. The end results of that search, his marriage to Josephine, belongs to my next chapter, but because I think that his search was complicated by his fear of impotence, and that it illustrates to some extent his curious attitude to women in general, I shall at this point take a look at young General Bonaparte in the autumn of 1795. 26 years old, already a general of artillery, already displaying a ruthless streak allied to intense ambition, but without sexual experience, if we accept the opinion of Frederick Masson. I do not myself. Rather short and thin, and with straggly, ill-kept hair, he was shy, diffident, and awkward with women. Too poor to dress well, his boots were so much too big for him that one young girl nicknamed him Puss in Boots. He had just broken off a promising love affair with his sister-in-law, the attractive Desiree Clary, leaving her broken-hearted without any sort of excuse. When the Bonapartes took refuge in Marseille in 1793, after leaving Corsica in a hurry because of their quarrel with Paoli, they made the acquaintance of the family of Francois Clary, a rich textile merchant, and in September 1794, Joseph Bonaparte married the eldest daughter, Julie. Encouraged by his brother's example and helped by his services as an intermediary, Napoleon began to consider very seriously the advantages of marrying the younger sister, Eugenie Desiree. No doubt the prospect of another rich dowry from the Clary family was not absent from his thoughts. If a formal engagement took place, it was probably in April 1795, when he was for a time in Marseille, but by May he was in Paris. Paris, that's the new pronunciation, bruv. Whence he wrote to Desiree, but more often to Joseph, to whom he revealed his burning desire to set up a home, and added that if nothing could be arranged with Eugenie, the whole thing must be broken off. This finally enabled him to justify his conduct. At least in his own eyes, it was all her fault for not writing often enough. He ghosted her. Joseph had muddled it all. And St. Helena put the fucking period. I'll never give up on that period. He claimed that she had been in love with him, had hidden under his bed, and that he had taken her maidenhead. But, according to General Bertrand, who knew him well for many years, he only began to tell this most ungallant story towards the end of his life, when the habit of boasting coarsely about his successes with women was becoming pronounced. Such boasting is more often associated with those who feel insecure about their virility than with those whose prowess in that sphere needs no advertisement. Napoleon's subsequent conduct makes it seem far more likely that the physical handicap of substandard masculinity and his fear of impotence made him doubt his ability to satisfy a loving and lovable young bride like Desiree, and drove him to seek not only material advantages, but sexual encouragement and help from the all too experienced Josephine. I have said that he left Desiree without any excuse, but his real feelings were probably revealed in an unusually subtle manner in a short novel which he wrote and dedicated to her during his courtship. It was called Clisson at Eugenie, and the hero, Clisson, spent his time studying for the military profession. Wonder if has this book been published? Instead of pursuing girls like the other young men of his age, Eugenie was Desiree's first name, and she usually referred to herself in her letters to Napoleon as a young Eugenie. Remembering Napoleon's lifelong urge for self-revelation, can we doubt that this was a roundabout way of explaining his feelings for her? Hey, I won't just tell you, I'll write a fucking novel. I mean, come on. As we shall see when further discussing this love affair in Chapter 6, he never forgot her or his own cruel treatment of his first love. I won't just send you a small letter. I'll fucking write a novel, bruv. When Bonaparte, the real-life Clisson, did after all find a wife, he left her in pursuit of his military career after a honeymoon of less than 48 hours, and made love to her daily and passionately, but by letters. May 1795, after leaving Marseille, and Desiree, who still loved him and hoped that he would marry her, he had a brief dalliance on the way to Paris with the 24-year-old Victorine de Chassenay, just the right age for him, but she could only get him going by talking about Corsica. Thenceforward, his attention was entirely centered upon women much older than himself, who he may have thought were less likely to laugh at Puss in Boots. Two of these, to whom he actually proposed marriage, told him themselves that they were old enough to be his mother. They were Mademoiselle de Montésir, about age 60, and Madame Permon, a 40-year-old friend of his mother. To Madame Pernon, he proposed that his sister Pauline should marry her son, and he himself should marry her. He was deeply hurt when she laughed heartily, and she then became quite worried to find that the ridiculous proposal had been intended seriously. Other women who received proposals of marriage were Madame de la Boucharde, Madame de l'Espada, and very probably Grace Dalrymple, later Lady Elliot. This charming and adventurous young Scotswoman, only 4 years older than Napoleon, was a woman of considerable beauty and strength of character, and might have made an excellent empress. It would have created an intriguing situation, as she already had an illegitimate daughter by the Prince of Wales. She had been imprisoned during the terror with Josephine, and her husband Alexander de Beauharnais, and in her memoir she wrote about an affair with Beauharnais had openly conducted with the pretty little Madame de Custine after her husband's execution. The only woman younger than himself with whose name Bonaparte's was linked during these months in Paris was Therese Tallien, a fascinating and very loose-living former aristocrat, 4 years younger than Napoleon. She was the wife of an important and influential man in the Directory, and as it is evident that at this time in his life, the furtherance of his career meant more to Napoleon than anything else. It seems unlikely that he had any serious intentions towards Madame Tallien. Barras had impressed upon him the advisability of marriage, because as a married man he would have standing in society and be less likely to be attacked. He pointed out the advantages of Josephine's connections with both the old and new regimes, and stressed that the marriage would make Bonaparte less Corsican and more French. Confiding in Barras, Before finally proposing to Josephine, Napoleon said that he was not trying to seduce a virgin, as he was the kind of man who preferred to find love ready-made rather than have to make it himself. Josephine had been Barras's mistress, and she also consulted him. He knew that she did not love her strange little suitor, and he was not the only person to whom she admitted this. Barras said that she exclaimed, "When one has loved a man like you, Barras, can one ever know another attachment?" He crudely reminded her about her affairs with General Hoche and others. Barras's memoirs are the main source of the allegation that Napoleon took his discarded mistress off his hands and was rewarded with command of the army of Italy as a dowry. Credit for the discovery of the young Bonaparte's talents and for his appointment really belongs to Carnot, who was Minister for Wool, and had read the young officer's reports and military plans. But Barras always claimed that he had discovered Bonaparte and engineered his marriage to Josephine. He conceived a lifelong jealous hatred of this pair, who he felt had shouldered him aside as they rose to imperial power. Count Paul Barras, this nobleman who voted for the death of the king, was one of the most evil men of the Revolution, and his evidence about Napoleon and Josephine can be accepted only with caution. Many of Napoleon's frankest avowals of his physical and psychological difficulties were made to strangely chosen confidants, and in 1796 he could not foresee that the influential and friendly Barras would become a bitter enemy and betray his confidence, and Josephine's also. In St. Helena, he told Las Casas that Barras was immoral, shameless, debauched, and homosexual. All this was probably true. I thought he had a bunch of bitches. All this was probably true, but however unsavory Barras's own character may have been, and however much he may have been influenced by jealousy, the remark about ready-made love, which he attributed to Napoleon, fits very well into the pattern of the kind of the man young General Bonaparte was at that time. Less than 5 years later, this seeker for ready-made love discussed a curious plan for a ready-made son proposed by Count Roederer as a counselor of state concerned with the imperial succession. Roederer was to have a striking interview with the emperor in November 1804, in which he was treated to some hard home truths about Napoleon's family. And much the same thing occurred during an intimate conversation with the first consul on 2nd August 1800. Roederer suggested that Bonaparte, why they switch between the Bonapartes, should adopt the boy of about 12 whom he could educate and love. The plan did not appeal to Bonaparte, whose doubts of his own ability to have a son of his own were evident. However, he assured Roederer that he did not feel the need or advantage of having a child, and added that he was without family feeling, and that his great anxiety at Marengo had been that if he were killed, one of his brothers might succeed him. These remarks do not ring true. There's abundant evidence of Napoleon's intense desire to have a son, and for all the contempt which he sometimes showed for his brothers, he could never quite suppress his Corsican clan spirit. Some of his plans for a successor involved members of his family. Like most of us, he sometimes spoke hastily under the influence of a passing mood, and he said himself that those who took no notice of things which he said when in a bad mood served him best. How much weight, then, dare we give to some of the gushes of self-revealing confidence which enliven the steady stream of his eloquence? That confession to Las Casas, for example, about his feebleness in the game of love. The word he is said to have used is one which sounds more likely to have been used by the scholarly secretary than by the Corsican, who never fully mastered the French language. I have already given my reasons for thinking that the remark does ring true. I thought he just said it didn't. That remark does ring true, and I cannot believe that the sycophantic Las Casas would have invented anything which would dent the image of his arrow. thought they hated each other. This guy makes no sense. But to get back to 1796, historians are agreed that the young general was desperately anxious to get married soon, and preferably to someone who might bring him material advantages to help his career. They have, however, overlooked what I believe to have been a more important consideration: help in adapting himself to the sexual demands of marriage. And as is so often the case, I have only to wait for the man himself to confirm my theory. In St. Helena, when he was no longer a man of action but of words, many, many words, whilst looking back over the story of his life, he frequently discussed his wives with Bertrand, Gourgaud, and Lacasse. He confessed that he had only married Josephine because he believed her to possess a considerable fortune, but he added the highly significant comment that he had wanted to make himself appear more mature and that Josephine had been the first woman to give him reassurance. In most respects, Napoleon had been quite exceptionally mature from at least the age of 15, but not in the difficult sphere of sexual maturity. If this remarkably self-confident, aggressive young man of 26 felt the need for ready-made love and reassurance in pursuit of sexual maturity, that is no more than our medical examination has led us to expect. Of all the not this fucking organ inferiority, of all the symptoms associated by Adler with organ inferiority due to defects in the genitourinary system, the one which most affected Napoleon's life was psychogenic impotence, the form of emotional immaturity which various indications have already alerted us to suspect is a tendency to homosexuality. Hey, my dick doesn't work, I'm gonna bang bros. It makes no sense. And in due course, we shall see that this tendency was not always completely repressed, unless he was the top and the dudes were the bottoms. Even if in his early 20s, Napoleon's homosexuality was latent, repressed, unconfessed, it could have made a powerful contribution to his fears of impotence. When he said, "I have never really loved, except Josephine, a little," he may well have meant that he had never loved as he desired to love. And Josephine's comments, which I have quoted, point to what he may have meant by a little. And he wasn't meaning his organ inferiority, I suppose. And that's the end of this chapter, bruv. We shall move on to chapter 6. Sweethearts and wives. Next time, bruv. Goodbye. Goodbye.